I wasn't supposed to be there. Not that day. Not at that time, but that's how it always starts, doesn't it? The big things, the moments that shift trajectories, rarely announce themselves. They hide in the mundane, wrapped in caffeine and background playlists and the hiss of steamed milk that I had just come from a particularly frustrating meeting at SpaceX. Starship's next test flight had been delayed again. Something about fuel pressure anomalies. My engineers were cautious, maybe too cautious. And well, I needed so I ducked into a Starbucks. Not one of those polished ones in Beverly Hills. This was the one off Jefferson Boulevard, tucked between a laundromat and a nail salon. The kind of place that smells like ambition and overworked espresso machines. There were 3 people in line. I barely registered them, then I heard a voice, quick, precise, with a hint of sarcasm, say, "Didn't expect to see you in the land of $5 drip." I turned. The barista behind the counter wore the green apron like a second skin. Messy curls. One sleeve rolled up. A name tag that said Leo, though the edges were worn to the point of anonymity. He looked maybe mid-20s, but with eyes that had seen more than that. Sharp. Too sharp for this place. I could say the same to you, I replied, stepping forward. Didn't expect the coffee to come with commentary. Leo smirked. Comes free with the first eye contact. What'll it be? I glanced at the board. None of it sounded appealing. Black coffee. No sugar. He nodded. Classic. Efficient. On brand. He moved like someone who didn't just make drinks but thought while doing it. His hands were fast, but his eyes were reading me. Measuring something. Rough morning, he asked, not out of politeness. More like a detective asking about a broken watch. You could say that, I muttered. Fuel problems. That got a flicker. Just a flicker. But he didn't ask what I meant. Instead, he said, "You ever think you're overcomplicating things?" I raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? Leo handed me the coffee. You build rockets that return to Earth. That's wild. But at some point, maybe the answer isn't bigger engines. Maybe it's a different kind of engine. Now that caught my attention that I studied him. You know something about rockets? I know a little about everything, he said. Comes with being a barista. Everyone talks to us. Pilots. Engineers. Physics majors pulling all-nighters. You'd be amazed what you learn when you stop pretending you're invisible. He wiped the counter casually. Tell me something, Elon. Ever think of going electric? I blinked. What do you mean? Leo leaned on the edge of the counter, like this was a chess match he'd just entered. Your rockets burn an insane amount of fuel. RP-1, LOX, liquid methane, it's high energy, sure. But also high cost. High complexity. He paused, but what if, just what if, you could offload part of that load thrust support, power redistribution, even partial lift with electric systems? Hybrid propulsion. Not theoretical. Scalable. He said it so casually. Like he was suggesting I try almond milk instead of cream. Electric thrust doesn't have the power density, I said automatically. Not yet. Ion drives, sure, but not for launch. Leo smiled. Not a smug smile, an anticipatory one. Like a magician knowing when to show the card, not for primary lift. But maybe as an auxiliary system. Think grid fins, think gimbal stabilizers, think post-launch thrust correction. Maybe even low-orbit drift control. Cut the burn. Increase precision. Save cost. I stared at him. No one at SpaceX had said it like that. Not that plainly. Not from that angle. And you came up with this while steaming milk? I asked, voice quieter now. Leo tapped his temple. No. I came up with it while watching your Starship tests and wondering why no one ever asks the guy behind the counter what he sees. There was silence between us. Not awkward. Just full, then Leo added, look, I'm not trying to pitch you. I'm just saying maybe you're chasing Mars with the wrong engine. And then, like the moment hadn't just cracked open the floor beneath us, he said, that'll be $3.65. I paid, took the coffee, and walked to a corner table, but I didn't open my laptop. I didn't check my phone that I just sat there, because for the first time in a very long time, someone had surprised me, and I hadn't even asked for his last name that I left the Starbucks, coffee in hand, but my head wasn't in Los Angeles anymore. It was in orbit, the idea kept looping. Not the full switch to electric that was science fiction for now. But Leo hadn't suggested replacing fire with wires. He'd suggested reshaping the gap between them. Reducing reliance. Optimizing where it hurt most. What if we'd been so focused on burning smarter that we'd missed the chance to burn less altogether? I returned to SpaceX with something unfamiliar buzzing inside me, not skepticism, not even excitement, humility. The kind you feel when someone outside the system spots a flaw too elegant to ignore. At the Hawthorne HQ, my team was mid-review of the booster telemetry from the last Falcon 9 launch. As usual, heat signatures, fuel consumption curves, stabilizer lag, all within tolerances. Predictable. Safe. That I sat down quietly. Didn't interrupt, but then I asked something I hadn't asked in years, what's our power loss through grid fin deployment? Everyone paused. My lead systems engineer, Dara, turned toward me slowly. Negligible, she said. We bleed off battery power during descent, minimal impact. I nodded. Right. And what if it wasn't minimal? She blinked. What do you mean? What if we could use electric propulsion not as primary thrust but to offset burn where possible? Like drift correction. Mid-course stabilization. Even launch pad vectoring. Have we run models on that? Now the room was still. Are you talking electric thrusters? One of the propulsion guys asked, cautiously. Not ion, I clarified. Not deep space engines. I'm talking fast response, high-precision assist systems. High voltage. Maybe magnetoplasma if the densities work. Where is this coming from? Dara asked. That I could have lied. Said I read it in a paper. Heard it from an old colleague, but I didn't. Barista, I said. This morning. Starbucks. They laughed. But not unkindly. One of the younger guys, Milan, maybe 28, eyes too tired for his age, grinned. Well, now I feel threatened by cappuccino logic. But then something shifted. Dara's fingers tapped against her laptop. Wait a second, she murmured. We've actually been getting anomalies in the second stage correctional burns. Microbursts triggering too often. We thought it was wind shears or feedback delay. But if we had vector correction through electric plasma, her voice trailed off, but her hands were already flying over the keys. You could feel it in the room, the hunger. Engineers feed on disruption. And this wasn't nonsense. This was clean math waiting to be discovered. I leaned back. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt something I hadn't felt in a while. Play. That I didn't say Leo's name. I didn't want him turned into a symbol. Not yet. Instead, I asked Dara to model 3 variations of a hybrid plasma-electric stabilization module. No engine replacement. Just functional offload from the primary booster. If it saved even 2% of burn, we were talking millions. And for Starship? Billions. That night I didn't go home. I pulled up archived launch footage. Falcon 9 landings. Starhopper bounces. I watched for waste. For redundancy. For opportunities. Leo's words played in my head. Maybe you're chasing Mars with the wrong engine. I wasn't ready to admit he might be right. But he wasn't wrong either. 3 days passed. The team ran 2 prototype simulations. The numbers weren't perfect, but they weren't laughable either. Plasma dispersion patterns showed promise. Battery draw was heavy, yes, but if we paired it with onboard solar augmentation or rapid charging banks, we might have something. And I couldn't get the barista out of my mind. So on the 4th morning, I went back, same Starbucks. Same shift. And there he was, headphones dangling from his neck, wiping a table while arguing with the espresso machine that he didn't see me at first. When he turned, I held up my cup. "You forgot to charge me for the idea," I said. That he stared for a second, then smiled. I was wondering how long it'd take. "Got a minute?" I asked. "I get off in 20, he said. "But I'm not clocking out for a job interview." "It's not an interview," I said. "It's a conversation." 21 minutes later, we were sitting at a corner table. Leo had a blueberry muffin and a black coffee. No laptop. No resume. Just that same calm confidence, like he'd been waiting for this to happen. I ran the numbers. I told him. "Which part?" he asked, tearing a piece off the muffin. "All of it. Auxiliary propulsion. Plasma vectoring. Even atmospheric correction models. And you're either very lucky," I said, "or very underemployed." Leo shrugged. "You don't need a title to have a thought." He sipped his coffee, then looked at me. "Really looked. You ever notice," he said, "how the smartest people get trapped in their own brilliance? You build beautiful things, but you build them from the inside out. The rest of us, we live outside the diagram. It makes us see differently." "You know," I said, "most people try to get inside the diagram." Leo smiled. "Yeah, but if everyone's inside, who's watching the walls?" That stuck with me. The next day, I asked HR to draft a temporary consulting contract. Nothing fancy. Just exploratory. I wasn't trying to poach a barista. I just didn't want the conversation to end. Leo didn't say yes right away. That he read the entire document. Asked questions. Then said, "I'll give you 2 weeks. But if this becomes about titles or org charts, I'm out." Fair enough. He started showing up at 10 a.m., always with a notebook, never with fanfare. At first, some of the team rolled their eyes. But by day 5, he was in a room with Dara, Milan, and 2 plasma experts diagramming solutions on a whiteboard no one else had touched in months. And the crazy thing, he wasn't always right, but when he was scarily right. By the end of the second week, we had a working draft of what we started calling Project Drift. A modular system designed to offload micro-adjustments from main engines, using a combination of plasma pulse tech and real-time atmospheric feedback. Projected cost savings: 4.3% per mission. That was over $3.7 million. Per launch. Leo didn't ask for stock. He didn't ask for credit, just a better coffee machine in the testing bay. That I said yes, and still, I didn't know who he really was. Not yet. That it didn't take long for people to start whispering, "You don't bring an outsider into SpaceX without raising eyebrows, especially not one who used to steam milk 5 days a week for minimum wage. Not when your engineers have MIT degrees and resumes that read like spacecraft manuals." But here's the thing about Leo: that he never tried to prove anything. That he never asked to lead meetings or pitch in front of execs. He just showed up every day at 9:58 a.m. with his old notebook, an extra charger, and a thermos of homemade black coffee. He took notes. Asked the kinds of questions that make senior engineers pause mid-sentence. And when he had an idea, he waited until the room quieted before offering it. Never loud, never dramatic. That he didn't chase attention, but it found him anyway. By the end of week 3, Project Drift was no longer a hypothetical. We had working models. Simulations. A test bed scheduled for the next booster trial. Our electrical systems lead, an older guy named Branson who hadn't liked a new hire in 7 years, muttered in passing, "Kid sees angles I missed." Praise like that. Rare as oxygen on Mars, and yet, something gnawed at me. Not suspicion. Not quite, but curiosity. Leo didn't talk much about his background. He never mentioned a degree. Never referenced where he learned plasma theory or how he could calculate drift-to-mass ratios faster than half my team. At first, I chalked it up to instinct. There are people who think sideways, and he was clearly one of them, but sideways thinking still comes from somewhere. One night I walked past the diagnostics lab. It was late past midnight. Most of the team had gone home. I was heading to my car when I saw the lights still on. There was Leo, hunched over a console, tweaking the simulator. He had headphones on. Something orchestral. Violins and synths mixed in a strange harmony. I knocked on the glass that he didn't flinch that I opened the door. "You always work this late?" I asked that he glanced up. "I don't like distractions." I walked in, leaned against the wall. "You've been here 4 weeks, I said. The prototype's almost ready for integration. If it works, we'll rewrite the propulsion budget." He nodded, eyes back on the screen. "So," I said slowly, "where'd you learn all this?" There was a pause. Leo didn't answer right away, then he said, "You ever heard of Dr. Evelyn Kessler?" I frowned. "The plasma physicist? Worked at Caltech. Died a few years ago, right?" Leo nodded. "She was my mother." The words landed like a micrometeorite. Quiet, but forceful that I blinked. I didn't know she had children. "She didn't talk about me much," Leo said, eyes still on the monitor. "And I didn't talk about her much either. But I was there. In the garage when she built her first mock-up of a rotating plasma chamber. I helped solder it. I was 10. I said nothing that he continued. "I didn't go to college. Not formally. But I sat through her lectures from the back of the room. Read her journals. Coded her models when her hands started shaking near the end. That explained it. Not just the knowledge. The intuition. The discipline." "She was brilliant," I said. "She was lonely," he replied, tone flat. "She said the more she knew, the fewer people understood her. So she started writing for herself. Diagrams no one would read. Papers no one cited." He paused. I didn't want to end up like that. I watched him, suddenly unsure of what to say. "You're not like that," I finally said. "You're changing the trajectory of a real program." "For now," he said softly. "But brilliance fades fast when you don't come with credentials." The bitterness in his voice surprised me. It wasn't angry. Just tired that I stepped closer. "Leo, I don't care about your resume. You've earned your place here." He turned to face me fully for the first time. And his eyes sharp as ever held something else now. Not defiance. Not even pride, just hope. "I'm not here for a job," he said. "I'm here for the idea." I nodded. "Then let's make sure it flies." That night, I stayed late with him. We worked in silence for hours. Refining the model. Debugging the core relay. Adjusting voltage limits at 2:17 a.m. The simulator returned the final green flag, projected reduction in propellant mass, 4.91%, for orbital launches. That was historic. Leo leaned back in his chair. "That's it," he said, almost to himself. That I didn't respond, because something inside me already knew this was going to work, and when it did, everything would change. But what I didn't know yet, what none of us knew, was that the day we integrated Project Drift into the booster, something else would come to light. Something from Leo's past. Something that had been waiting to surface, and when it did, it wouldn't just test the system. It would test all of us. That I didn't realize right away that he actually remembered what I said. After that conversation, just me, a barista behind the counter at Starbucks, throwing out an off-the-cuff idea about partially converting his rockets to electric propulsion. I figured it was just one of those weird moments that happen in between espresso shots and drive-through orders. Elon Musk had listened, nodded politely, then walked out like he was already halfway to Mars. And I went back to steaming milk and restocking napkins, telling myself it was just a story I'd one day tell badly to someone who wouldn't believe it. But then 2 weeks later everything changed. That I was on my break, sitting in the back room eating a slightly stale muffin, when my manager walked in holding a plain white envelope. "Hey," she said, "someone left this for you. No name, just Elon Y vibes." Inside the envelope was a first-class plane ticket to Austin, Texas. And a note. Just one sentence, handwritten in neat, sharp letters: "Your idea kept me up at night. Let's talk." I stared at it for a solid minute before laughing out loud. I thought, this has to be a prank. Someone's messing with me. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Fast forward to a sleek conference room at SpaceX headquarters. I was standing in front of a whiteboard, nervous as ever, surrounded by engineers with resumes long enough to reach orbit. Elon sat across from me, still and quiet, eyes locked on the diagrams I'd sketched out about using electric-powered booster systems to supplement the first stage of rocket launches. "You're not an aerospace engineer," one of the guys said, skeptical. "No," I admitted, "I make flat whites." But Elon raised a hand to stop the room. "He's not wrong," he said. "The physics checks out. Not for every launch, not yet. But with the right balance of ion propulsion and stored power, we could offset enough fuel in the early stages to drop costs. Especially for smaller payloads." That's when I realized something. He didn't just hear what I said that day in Starbucks, he listened. Over the next several months, I was pulled deeper into the project. I didn't have the credentials, but Elon gave me the title, Special Research Associate. Mostly, I asked questions the others weren't asking. Sometimes, I asked the ones they were afraid to point. One day, he pulled me aside during a test. The prototype hadn't worked as expected. People were tense. Numbers didn't line up. "Still think it's a good idea?" he asked. That I nodded. "It just needs time." He smiled. "So do most things that matter." A few weeks after that, I got the paperwork. I was officially on staff. But that wasn't the surprise came with the second envelope. Inside was a legal agreement. Elon had awarded me 10% of the net profit from the new line of hybrid stage rockets, should they go to market. Not a bonus. Not a symbolic thank you. Actual ownership. That I tried to say something. Anything. I couldn't. That he just shrugged and said, "Ideas are cheap. Listening isn't." "You reminded me of something important. Sometimes the best ideas aren't buried in degrees, they're hiding behind a coffee counter." So yeah. That's how it happened that I still walk into Starbucks sometimes, just for the nostalgia. Nobody recognizes me. And I like it that way, because at the end of the day, the story's not about me. It's about what can happen when someone listens to a voice they weren't supposed to. And what it means to speak an idea out loud, even if you're the one wearing the apron.